Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hope everyone's well. So, we're on part 2 now of the philosophy of science. And in this part, we said we were going to talk about different analysis and the observation problem, where people say that science is a fact because we observe things and observations don't change. So, let's take them one by one. And let's go through different analysis first. So, we don't want that. Let's get rid of that. So, what do I mean by this? So what I mean is different analysis. So what we're talking about here is that when you have data, okay, because that's what science does, it collects data and you make conclusions, and from that you test it, that are those conclusions true, and then something becomes a theory. And we'll talk about theories when we talk about observations. But when you get that data and you draw conclusions from it, like we talked about last time in the scientific method, those conclusions are subjective, so they're based on what the person with the knowledge who's looking at it thinks. Let's take the example of evolution. Okay, remember we're talking about Darwinian evolution in this case. We're not talking about evolution in terms of general change over time. Everything in the world changes and naturally changes over time. We're talking about evolution in terms of Darwinian evolution. So, for example, as we learned in one of the first episodes, evolution came from, well, its main proponent, to be honest, was Erasmus Darwin. Sorry, who kind of created it all. But Erasmus or Darwin, we'll put them both together. Okay? But then you also had contrasting theories based on the evidence. Yeah? You had Lamarckism, which we talked about as well. Okay? Lamarckism was a valid scientific theory until it was disproved that you cannot acquire acquired characteristics cannot be inherited. Yeah, so a characteristics that you get from the environment that you learn, they cannot be inherited and passed down to the next generation. And that was obviously, like we said, struck out. But there's actually a resurgence, something called neo-Lamarckism. I'm not going to go into it because that's not the scope of this. But the point being is you have different analysis of how evolution works. As well as that, you have another new theory which is coming up, which is that against, and it's anti-random mutation. So random mutation, which we'll come to talk about, I don't think we have talked about it in terms of its refutation, is one of the main staying points and one of the main bases of the Darwinian theory of evolution today, which is accepted by scientists. And so there's alternate theories which say that mutations, which are changes in the gene and the protein sequence which makes up genes, so this here is saying that it's not random and that there are things which affect that mutation, such as the environment and things called polymorphism, which is many genes coded together. Many things being coded by a gene. So it's really, really complex in the way that we say, and we cannot really say that Darwinian evolution has one kind of interpretation, because you can't say that of all of science. Okay, there are in some of science there are many different ways of analyzing things, and generally in science you have a difference of opinion, just like in any academic science. You have a difference of opinion about what the actual way of interpreting that data is. Okay, so let's carry on and look at the second bit, the fourth point, which we were going to talk about originally, which is observations. So what I mean by this is someone can return back to you and say, well, when I observe something, that's a fact, right? Therefore, science is a fact. So, for example, swans, okay? A swan is white. You have white swans, don't you? So if you go out to, I don't know, Buckingham Palace one day and you look at the Queen's Garden and you see a white swan and you look at it and you say, oh look, a white swan. You could say, well look, science says and proves that when I've made this observation, the observation cannot be wrong. There is no way that when you looked at that swan, if you were telling the truth, that it couldn't have been white. And so they say, well, that means obviously science leads to truth because observation is true. No one is disagreeing with that. Let's put it in green. Observations do equal a fact. Yeah? So, for example, if I was, the time here is almost midnight, so if I was looking to the sky and say the sky is black, okay, That's an observation, that's a fact. No one is ever contesting that. What's important to remember is we're contesting scientific theories as fact. That is what we're contesting. Okay? So this is why I'm going to circle it. This is what we are contesting. That is not true. Observations are facts, okay? And people will try and throw this at you and say, well, look, I can say this and I can say that, and that doesn't change. Yeah, that's because it's an observation. We're talking about scientific theories, which are a group of observations and collection of data which is done, and then conclusions drawn from that data to then form a rational explanation of how that happens. So, for example, the best way to put it is the best one that we all know is the best one that we all know, we should be familiar with Newton's laws of gravity. So his second law, where force equals mass times acceleration, that's a scientific theory, okay? And we accept it because you know what, it works pretty good, where basically everything in the world almost works. But it's still a scientific theory, yeah? Like we talked about in the last episode, Newton's other theories haven't been disproved. Newton's other theories have been disproved. For example, his theory that we talked about as time, yeah, that time was a fixed unit, which has been not. It's not. Well, I mean, you can say disproved, but it's not accepted anymore when you have Einstein physics, which says that time is relative, yeah, and you have general relativity and things like that, which has kicked Newtonian physics regarding time out of the window. No one really accepts that anymore. So the point being, the scientific theories aren't fact. Why aren't they fact? Because they're inductive, like we said. Yeah, they're based on limited observations, and from those observations we have good reason to believe them, but they cannot be a fact. They cannot be a fact because by their very nature they don't ever assume to be a fact. They only assume to be the best working model. They're theories. They're the best way to explain things at that time. And if we observe something new which changes it, we'll then accept that for the time being. And that's the beauty of science, to be honest. You know, sometimes I hear Muslims saying, oh, look, science changes. How can you really accept something which changes? No, that's the beauty of science. That it can change because we become more aware of the world that Allah Azza wa Jalla has made around us, we learn to grasp it, we grasp its meaning better, and as we grasp that meaning and study it more in depth, our knowledge and our equations change to fit the world which Allah has made. And because we are not the creators and we're just finding a way around it, we have to change almost all the time. I mean, I can't remember who it was, but there's in the philosophy of science, there's a really widespread acceptance in the community that there's a paradigm shift. So I'm not using a big word because I just want to sound clever. Paradigm shift. So paradigms are a set of laws. Yeah. So in science, you basically have paradigm shifts going on all the time, where when you observe something new, it changes the laws of what you've known before. That happened with Newton when he came up with his laws of gravity, which kind of displaced Aristotle physics. And then you had Einstein with his theory of general relativity, which displaced Newtonian physics in regards to time. And you have it all the way throughout history, for example, with Copernicus and Galileo, in terms of the sun being the centre, not the earth. It happens all the time in science. So when we talk about Darwinian evolution, where after this we'll get more into the nitty-gritty of the theory itself, but I thought it was really important for you to kind of grasp and understand what science actually is, how it postulates itself in terms and sets out its stall in terms of what it is, and not letting it be hijacked by people who've taken it now as a religion. Because it was not a religion, it's something which works for us in the world, and it's subject to change, and it's not ever absolutely right, but that's the beauty of it. So I hope that makes sense. Any questions, feel free to put them in the comments. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.